Today we're going to talk about purling, but first we're going to talk about stockinette and basically our tools. So this is the yarn called Chow by Jody Long. I love it. It's a superwash merino. Love that yarn. I'm using double points for this demo because it's easier for me to have short needles and short stitches, so fewer stitches, so that you can actually really see this. When you look at the front of stockinette, it's flat. This is the knit side of stockinette. You look at the back side, it is the purl side of stockinette. See all these bumps? They're purl bumps based on stockinette is knitting on the front, purling on the back. So when you knit a stitch, you put your needle in behind the leg, out underneath into the back. When you purl a stitch, you go from the middle out to the front. It's the opposite of knitting. Putting in the needle opposite of knitting. So in, around, trapping your yarn in between the two needles, back, out and through. In, around, back out and through. So in, around, out and through. In, around, back and through. It becomes fairly quick after you've mastered knitting, after you understand how to knit. Purling is not such a big deal other than it's backwards. You get used to it pretty quickly. The yarn always stays in the front of your work, where in knitting it's always in the back of your work. So it becomes fairly quick. I like to hold my yarn kind of backwards on my finger from knitting. When I'm knitting, I like to have my yarn coming from the front, like that. Works for purling too. But for purling, I actually like it the other way, a little bit better. So now we finished our row. Here's our nice little stitches. Turn to the front, and we're going to knit to this side because that's how we do it. Needle goes into the back. We're going to grab our yarn by scooping with our little finger over our palm and around our finger, and it's just the opposite of purling. Into the back, around, and pull it to the front. In to the back, out to the front. Into the back, out to the front. Same counterclockwise wrapping, same trapping of the stitches. It's just the two are the opposite. The knit is one direction and the purl is another. Now sometimes when you're knitting, you end up with a goofy little loose stitch at the end of your work. So when you turn, you see how you have this little loose stitch. It's pretty normal because if you break it down, this loose stitch will be this stitch when you turn and come to the end. The reason it gets loose is there's no place for that extra yarn to go. It will repair itself. As you see these edges, they've all repaired themselves just from knitting across and back. So let's go to purl again. When you purl, the other thing is when you knit, sometimes you pull your yarn over instead of under and you get these two little weird stitches. It increases your work as opposed to keeping it even. And you want to put your yarn and go under. With purling, your yarn is going to stay in the front. So that's a little bit confusing because you still have those couple of weird stitches there. So you gotta know that you'll look at the top of your needle to see where your stitches are lining up. See how that looks kind of funky. So let's grab our yarn too. Scoop over our pinky, over our palm, and up over our finger. Oops, let's try that again. In from the middle to the front. Wrap it around from the front to the back is how you take it off. In, from the back to the front, around, from the front to the back to take it off the needle. And you see how your stitch just comes right off the needle. Again, when you're knitting or purling, you want to hold your project and give it some give. If you hold it too tightly, see how I'm holding this very tightly, nothing really moves. It just becomes very stiff. You want to give it, allow it to slip through your fingers. There's that old parable about holding water. If you hold water in your fist, it doesn't stay, but if you cup your hand and open it loosely, it stays. Same thing with knitting. You want to be loose so that things will pull off easily. In, around, back and through. There you are. Here's the beautiful purl side. Here's our pretty knit side. When you go to count your stitches, like we always do in these videos, you'll see on the knit side, it lines right up into these little V's. You can count your rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. On the purl side, it's a little daunting to count rows on the purl side because it's all pretty even. But if you look at the stitch connected to the needle, it's like a little collar on the needle here. That's a purl bump. And if you go right down that line, you can count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The other thing you'll notice is there's frowns and smiles. The smile is the yarn traveling between the stitches. The frown is actually the stitch. So if you look up the column, the frown is connected to the stitch. So we have this beautiful little stockinette swatch, purling on one side, knitting on the other. Now you know how to purl, I hope. And thank you for sharing.